Greetings, dear friends. Welcome back to Bookworm History. My name is Dan, your tour guide through all things bookish and nerdy. And today on Bookworm History, we'll be taking a lazy boat trip up the Thames, as we talk about Jerome K. Jerome's 1890 comedic masterpiece. So make sure you've got your straw boaters and have packed enough dog food. Today, we're going to be discussing Three Men in a Boat, to say nothing of the dog. Now, the first question personally that I had when I started digging into the story behind the story of Three Men in a Boat was whether or not that was the author's real name, Jerome K. Jerome. I mean, let's be honest, it's an 1890 Victorian comedic British novel, and his name sounds like something out of a Wodehouse or a Dickens story, so there's no way it could possibly be real. I was wrong. The author's father was a man named Jerome Clapp, C-L-A-P-P. And even in the mid-1850s, the clap was still a popular slang word for gonorrhea. So he decided to change it to Jerome Clapp Jerome. Thus, his son became Jerome Klapka Jerome. Klapka spelled K-L-A-P-K-A. And so Jerome K. Jerome was born. Orphaned at age 14, the younger Jerome would hold many jobs to support his family. Everything from railroad clerk to memoirist, essayist to schoolteacher, clerk, and ultimately to novelist and memoirist. Now, carrying the theme of uniting novels and memoirs, all of the characters in Three Men in a Boat are based on real people. The main character, Jay, the narrator of the story, is based on Jerome himself. The character Harris was based on a man named Carl Henschel, who would later become a London printer. And George was based on a man named George Harris, a banker, or, as Jerome describes him within the context of the book itself, Jerome goes to sleep at a bank from 10 to 4 each day, except Saturdays, when they wake him up and put him outside at 2. Now the fourth character, Montmorency the dog, actually had no living counterpart, and was entirely fictitious, despite Jerome's insistence in the original preface of the book that Montmorency was in fact based on a real dog. Jerome would later write, "Montmorency I evolved out of my inner consciousness. There is something of the dog, I take it, in most Englishmen. Dog friends that I came to know later have told me he was quite true to life." Now, the idea of a boat trip up the Thames had become increasingly popular in the late Victorian era, especially into the late 1880s, as a result of two main factors. The first was the cleaning of the river itself. In 1857, the Thames Conservancy was created, which began to clean the river, and in 1885, the Thames Preservation Act declared, "It is lawful for all persons for pleasure or profit to travel or to loiter upon any and every part of the river." Now that was one factor. The other factor was the rise of cheap railroad transportation in the latter part of the 19th century. Not only did this get people off of the river, thus making fewer boats and more space for casual cruising, but it also got a lot of barges off the river. Previously, freight had been carried on the river on barges as the most economical means to move it. But in the latter part of the 19th century, all of that traffic moved to rails. Because railroads were suddenly cheaper, all of that space on the river suddenly cleared up. Now, the book itself was originally meant to be a travel guide, interspersed with the occasional comedic interlude, but still concentrating on the travel. Jerome makes heavy use of Dickens' Dictionary of the Thames in describing the local monuments and local historical sites all along the Thames River. The book was first published as a monthly serial in a magazine called Home Chimes from August of 1888 until June of 1889 under the title The Story of the Thames. It was first published in book form the following year, 1890, with the title Three Men in a Boat, to say nothing of the dog. And despite mediocre reviews from critics who had trouble rectifying the travel portions of a comedic novel or the funny portions of a travel guide, the book sold very well and did very well with the public. Jerome would follow the success of Three Men in a Boat 10 years later with a sequel, Three Men on the Bummel, published in 1900. The book contained the same three men, Jay, George, and Harris, only this time they were taking a bicycle trip through Germany, and Montmorency makes no appearance. Though intended as a comedic novel, the book nowadays can be awkward to read, just as a result of Jerome's generalizations about Germany, his descriptions of some of the cities and landmarks, especially places like Dresden, after the events of World War II. They make the book a little bit on the uncomfortable side to read, although there are certainly entertaining passages throughout, and overall it's a quick read and definitely worthwhile. As for the title, the word Bummel itself, Jerome explains on the last page of the book. "What is a Bummel?" said George. "How would you translate it?" "A Bummel," I explained, "I should describe as a journey, long or short, without an end, the only thing regulating it being the necessity of getting back within a given time to the point from which one started. Sometimes it is through busy streets, and sometimes through the fields and lanes. Sometimes we can be spared for a few hours, and sometimes for a few days. But long or short, but here or there, our thoughts are ever on the running of the sand. We nod and smile to many as we pass, with some we stop and talk a while, and with a few we walk a little way. We have been much interested, and often a little tired. But on the whole we have had a pleasant time, and are sorry when 'tis over." I'll leave you with one last thought, one of my favorite passages from the original book, Three Men in a Boat, which describes the dog Montmorency as getting into a fight with the tea kettle. "We finished up with tea and cherry tart. Montmorency had a fight with the kettle during tea time and came off a poor second. Throughout the trip he had manifested great curiosity concerning the kettle. He would sit and watch it as it boiled with a puzzled expression, and would try and rouse it every now and then by growling at it. When it began to sputter and steam, he regarded it as a challenge, and would want to fight it, only, at that precise moment, someone would always dash up and bear off his prey before he could get at it. Today, he determined, he would be beforehand. At the first sound the kettle made, he rose, growling, and advanced towards it with a threatening attitude. It was only a little kettle, but it was full of pluck, and it up and spit at him. 'Aye, would ye,' growled Montmorency, showing his teeth. 'I'll teach ye to check a hard-working, respectable dog, ye miserable, long-nosed, dirty-looking scoundrel, ye! Come on!' And then he rushed at the poor tea kettle and seized it by the spout. Then, across the evening stillness, broke a blood-curdling yelp, and Montmorency left the boat and did a constitutional 3 times round the island at a rate of 35 miles per hour, stopping every now and then to bury his nose in a bit of cool mud. From that day, Montmorency regarded the kettle with a mixture of awe, suspicion, and hate. Whenever he saw it, he would growl and back at a rapid rate, with his tail shut down, and the moment it was put upon the stove, he would promptly climb out of the boat and sit on the bank till the whole tea business was over." Well, that's all we've got for you today. Be sure to like this video, share it with your friends. Be sure to hit the subscribe button so you get future updates as soon as they come out. Hope you've enjoyed it. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on Bookworm History.